Natalee Holloway was a teen girl who went missing in another country that happened to be on an island. The possibilities of where she could be are endless. In May of 2005, Natalee Ann Holloway was on top of the world. She just graduated from high school and was about to go to Aruba with her classmates to celebrate. On May 26th, Natalee left for Aruba with around 120 other students and 7 chaperones. They checked into their rooms at the Holiday Inn and got their bearings down, while probably beaming with excitement over where they were. Natalee was scheduled to fly home on May 30th, but when the time came to gather in the lobby to head to the airport, she was nowhere to be found. Her friends went into her room and saw her passport and bags packed and ready to go, but they didn't see Natalee. A chaperone named Jody then had to make the terrifying phone call to Natalee's mom, Beth Twitty, to say they couldn't find her daughter anywhere. Beth was beside herself. How could Natalee just disappear? She was a straight A student about to attend the University of Alabama on a full ride scholarship. She would never be late like that. While some people may have suspected that Natalee stayed out late drinking and partying and was passed out in some other hotel room, Beth knew that wasn't the case. She was certain her daughter had been abducted. Beth went into mama bear mode while trying to remain calm, cool, and collected. She dialed 911 and told police dispatchers her daughter had just been abducted in Aruba and that she would be driving 110 miles per hour to get to Mississippi. I'm guessing to catch a flight. She said she wouldn't be pulling over for anyone. Beth hopped in her car, sped away, and by the time she reached Birmingham, Alabama, one of Beth's friends was able to get her a private jet with the help of the FBI. By 10 p.m., Beth, her husband Jug, who was also Natalee's stepdad, and 2 of Jug's close friends landed in Aruba and were ready to find Natalee. They were not messing around or wasting any time. Natalee's classmates mentioned seeing her the night before at the local nightclub/bar, Carlos and Charlie's. She was chatting it up and dancing with a 17-year-old dude, Joran Sloot, a guy who was originally from the Netherlands, but now lived in Aruba and studied at the International School of Aruba. And let me just say, Joran was really trying to put the moves on Natalee. That night, the club closed at 1 a.m. Most students went back to their hotel to get some sleep before their big travel day. But Natalee was seen leaving the club in a silver Honda with 3 young men, Joran and 2 of his friends, 21-year-old Deepak Kalpoe and 18-year-old Satish Kalpoe. Deepak and Satish were brothers from the small South American country of Suriname. Somehow, Beth, Jug, and their 2 friends were able to find all of that out on their first night in Aruba. They began their search at the Holiday Inn and found out Joran's name thanks to the night manager who recognized the guy. The manager said Joran would frequently go after female tourists. Beth and her crew then approached the police and presented them with the name and address of Joran, saying he was the guy who took Natalee. Wow. They made things so easy for the investigators. 2 Aruban police officers accompanied the 4 Americans and arrived at Joran's house to ask him some questions. Joran eventually admitted to the group that he left the bar with Natalee, Deepak, and Satish. He said they drove to a lighthouse to look at sharks and then dropped Natalee off at the Holiday Inn around 2 a.m. Joran said Natalee fell down as she got out of the car, and he tried to help her get up, but she refused. As Joran and his buddies drove away, he said a security guard came up to Natalee to help her in. He was all like, "Take me to the hotel and I'll show you the guy who escorted Natalee inside that night." So Beth and her crew did just that. But once they made it to the Holiday Inn, Joran wasn't able to find the guard. And I don't think it was because the guard was off that day. In the beginning, the Aruban authorities weren't too worried about Natalee's disappearance. They're all like, give it a few days and I'm sure she'll show up. Heck, go to the bar and grab a beer while you wait. That's not an exaggeration. A detective literally told Natalee's dad, Dave, to get a beer. Isn't that up? Within 2 days, a big search group was formed. Over 100 tourists and locals were looking for Natalee, and the Aruban government gave a bunch of civil servants the day off to help in the search. Oh, they finally want to take the case seriously? I see how it is. Later on, Dutch Marines, fighter pilots flying F-16s, and other out-of-towners joined the efforts. The F-16s were equipped with infrared imaging devices to detect any freshly dug graves, police. That's some pretty impressive technology right there. The planes were flown all over Aruba looking for clues of Natalee, but the attempt, as brilliant as it may have been, was unsuccessful. In total, the Aruban police reportedly spent $3 million on the investigation. That's almost half of their operational budget, so you know this was a big deal. On June 5th, police officers arrested 2 former security guards from a nearby hotel on suspicion of abducting and slaying Natalee. It was never announced why the investigators suspected these men. Some think they may have been thrown under the bus by Joran, Deepak, and Satish. Others say the 2 guards were known for driving around hotels to pick up girls. A little over a week later, the 2 guards were released without being charged because the detectives had arrested other suspects, Joran and the Kalpoe brothers. Supposedly, the guards overheard the Kalpoes talking about how they didn't just drop off Natalee at the Holiday Inn that night. Instead, they dropped off Natalee and Joran at a beach nearby the Holiday Inn. Upon their release, one of the guards told this to the police, so interrogators knew they had to go in on Joran, Deepak, and Satish. Well, it didn't take long for the 3 suspects to confirm what the guard overheard. It's always so sketchy when people lie and change their story. It automatically makes me think they're guilty. Joran claimed he hung out on the beach with Natalee for a bit and then left her alone by her own will, and maintained he did not hurt her at all. After that, Joran said he called Deepak to let him know he was walking home, and 40 minutes later, he texted him. So as suspicious as these 3 men seemed, there was no hard evidence to suggest they slayed Natalee. Aruban authorities were under a lot of pressure by Natalee's family, the media, and frantic locals that most believed they arrested Joran, Deepak, and Satish prematurely, but they weren't the last men to be arrested in this case. On June 17th, a party boat DJ named Steve Gregory Crows was cuffed, and 5 days later, Paulus Vandersloot, aka Joran's dad, was also put in cuffs. Both men were speculated to be involved in the crime, but by June 26th, they were released. Right around that time, a group of volunteer divers searched the waters for Natalee using sonar equipment. They had no luck. On July 4th, the Kalpoe brothers were released by the police because they didn't have enough dirt on them to keep them in custody. Joran, however, was kept for an additional 60 days, which the judge never publicly stated why that decision was made. In mid-July, a park ranger was out picking up trash on the northeast coast of Aruba when he found a piece of duct tape with a few strands of hair stuck to it. He reported it to the authorities, and they suspected the hairs may have belonged to Natalee. Hopeful, detectives sent the hair samples off for DNA testing, but the results came back negative. It wasn't Natalee's hair. By this point, the chances of Natalee being found alive were slim, but her family was determined. They posted a $200,000 reward for her safe return and a $100,000 reward for information that revealed the truth about what happened. By the end of July, that $200,000 reward was upped to $1 million. That same month, investigators sniffed out a pretty hot lead. There was a gardener who said he got super hot on the night of May 30th and decided to drive to his boss's house, which had AC. At around 3 a.m., he took a shortcut through a vacant lot next to a Marriott hotel, but there was a car blocking the dirt path. That's strange, Carlos the gardener thought. He noticed there were 2 big piles of dirt next to the car, and when he peered into the window, he recognized Joran, Deepak, and Satish. After they were spotted, the 3 men reportedly covered their faces and drove off. With that story, detectives knew they had to dig around at the vacant lot. They also drained a nearby pond. Well, once the lot had been searched and the pond was completely drained, all that was left were a few pieces of trash. No Natalee. Police then theorized the gardener was lying, maybe to cash in on that huge reward Natalee's family posted. The deputy chief said the gardener's story was a concoction. Dang, that sucks if that's really the case. That gardener got everyone's hopes up and wasted a lot of time for it all to be a lie. On August 26th, the Kalpoe brothers were re-arrested along with a new suspect, Freddie, who had a history of being inappropriate with women. And just 1 week later, those 3 3 guys were released, as well as Joran. Just like before, the police had no solid evidence to arrest these guys, and they just kept questioning them with the hope that they'd eventually budge. With the release, the lead officer stated, "The investigation continues. The case of Natalee Holloway has not concluded with these releases." Over the next few months, several things happened in the case, but at the same time, it felt like nothing happened. In February of 2006, the Supreme Court of the state of New York accused Joran of malicious, wanton, and willful disregard of the rights, safety, and well-being of Natalee, but the suit was dismissed. In March, Joran gave an interview on CNN to share his side of the story. That same month, Aruban officers announced that witnesses said Natalee had substances on her, although no one actually saw her take them. The deputy chief stated, "We feel strongly that she probably went into shock or something happened to her system and that she just collapsed." Okay, but where did she go? At that point, the general consensus was that Natalee was no longer alive, but no one could find her body. In December, Natalee's parents tried to file a wrongful death suit against Deepak and Satish. The suit was dismissed due to lack of jurisdiction. It's pretty hard to go after someone in a US court when the crime happened in another country. In November of 2007, Joran and the Kalpoes were arrested again. This time, the authorities claimed to have new incriminating evidence, but within a matter of 2 weeks, the suspects were released. I can't imagine how hard all of this back and forth had to be for Natalee's family. They just wanted their daughter back, or at least answers to what happened, and anytime things got close to that happening, the case got catapulted backwards. After Joran's release this time, he traveled around the world and even lived in Thailand for a few months. Gotta soak up those final moments of freedom. The whole time, Joran was acting super sketchy, and anytime he was asked about the case, he would flip out. One time, he threw a glass of wine at a Dutch reporter's face when he asked Joran why anyone should believe what he said. I mean, the throwing of the glass is uncalled for, but at the same time, that reporter sounded like to me. Well, Joran and that reporter, Peter, actually became pretty close. By February of 2008, Peter claimed to have solved the case and had the evidence to prove it too. He said everyone would have to wait until the broadcast aired on the 3rd. What a cliffhanger, and a brilliant marketing tactic, but annoying. Peter set up a hidden camera which recorded Joran spilling some new tea about the case to his friend Patrick. When he and Natalee went to the beach that night, Joran said she started shaking uncontrollably and suddenly fell limp. Joran tried to resuscitate the unconscious Natalee, but was unsuccessful, which meant it was time for Plan B. He called his buddy, who helped him get rid of her body from a boat. Whoa. Seems like Peter was right. He may have just solved the case. Although I feel like Joran's confession still doesn't seem accurate. Yes, I think he did it, but I have a hard time believing Natalee seized up and passed away like that. If that was the case, I feel like Joran would have been honest right off the bat. Well, as solid as that confession sounded, Joran said it was false because he'd been smoking the devil's lettuce and was really high. He was all like, "That was a lie. I promise. I just left Natalee alone at the beach without hurting her." Turns out, Patrick, the guy Joran confessed to, was up to something pretty fishy. When Joran's confession first came out, Patrick said he barely knew the guy, but he was later caught on a secret camera saying he'd been friends with Joran for years and was expecting to become a millionaire through his involvement in the case. So it was a setup. Patrick did say that he knew the location of the body, but was paid off by Joran to keep it a secret. And things only get worse from here. So in March of 2010, Joran said he'd reveal the location of Natalee's body in exchange for $25,000 up front and another $225,000 after. Beth and Jug Twitty's legal team agreed. In May, the Twitty's lawyer met up with Joran and handed over $10,000 in a case, and the other $15,000 was sent via wire transfer. Joran then told the lawyer that his dad buried Natalee in the foundation of some house, but when the the authorities went to the location of the house Joran gave, nothing was there. Oh, and do you want to know what he did with the money? He went to Peru to play in a poker tournament. But Joran couldn't keep his hands off innocent women, and by the beginning of June, he was arrested in Peru for killing a 21-year-old woman in his hotel room. I wish I could say I was surprised, but we all knew it was only a matter of time before he struck again, considering how easy he was let off the hook the first time. So Joran actually executed this woman a few days earlier, but her body wasn't discovered then because Joran gave the hotel staff specific instructions to not come into his room. Joran went to trial in January of 2012 and pleaded guilty. He said, "I wanted from the first moment to confess sincerely. I truly am sorry for this act. I feel very bad." If you really are sorry, you would have never done it in the first place. 2 days later, Joran was found guilty and received a sentence of 28 years in jail. He was also ordered to pay $75,000 in reparations to the victim's family. As for Natalee's case, Joran still hasn't been pinned as the perp, and that same month, Natalee was officially declared lifeless. Well, after all of these leads, suspects, and searches, Natalee Holloway's case is still unsolved. No one knows where her body is or who is technically responsible, but I think it's pretty clear Joran is the guy. What do you think? Leave your theories in the comments below, and I'll see you next time on Killer Bites.